name is Verheyen. I'm chair of the Committee for Culture, Education, Media, Sports and Youth in the European Parliament. I'm now since 12.5 years in the European Parliament, mainly working in this field. And for me, science is very important because we also deal with the Horizon program, with education and the importance of science to our societies. It's not just a trend that we listen to scientists, it's also something we did since many years. Since I'm in Parliament, I just know that we have surveys made by our policy department in cooperation with universities themselves. We have hearings of experts where we invite regularly scientists, and also the personal exchange of each member with scientists is very close, especially for me, because I'm living in a city where we have a university. We have a university for applied sciences and a big research center in our region. So the exchange of scientists and the value of positions and support we get in politics by scientists is very important. It is important also to discuss directly with the scientists because it helps to understand each other, it helps to understand the facts. It also helps when the situation is that you have different approaches in science, because not always scientists have the same opinion. To read a study gives also possibilities for interpretation that might lead into a very wrong direction sometimes, or when it is ideologically driven, how I read the result of a study, it would be difficult. So the direct dialogue to answer questions or to make clear what was meant also by the scientist or by the politician is very important. First, I think what we have to fix is that scientists are not those who make the political decision in the end. So the political decision is normally based on different approaches, on different opinions, on different aspects of a problem. And when we, for example, ask for a study, and this is presented in the committee, and the scientists start to talk about the methodology in a very, let's say, broad way, or they focus on some substance which is not result-oriented, it sometimes leads to misunderstandings also with the politicians, because what we want out of the study is clearly to know how they work, but the main focus is on the facts and the results of the study. When we have questions, we want to get an answer on the question, and it is important how these answers were elaborated, but that's the second important question for us as politicians. And if, for example, in such a representation of 10 minutes, you have 8 minutes of that about the methodology and not about the facts and the results, it does not really help, and it leads to not just misunderstanding, but also confusion or frustration on the other side. I think what is very important is to have a direct, structured dialogue with politicians, not just case by case, but to have a structured platform of dialogue. It can be in expert groups, or it can be in combined exchange formats between universities and politics. We do that also on party level sometimes, that we invite for special issues, or in general scientists for an exchange. And I think that is very important to have that, not just in special cases, but as a general approach structured in the decision-taking process. You know about a fact, you know about a development from scientific side, but it is also important to bring people to accept that and to accept the consequences out of these research and results for their daily life. And I think there it is important to have a new way of communication of scientific results also to the public. And it would help if we would have a more regular also by media, a regular exchange or presentation on that what happens in the scientific sphere. Because I think many people just see their life, what they are doing, their everyday's environment, but to know what is going on a scientific level and to be better informed about that would help also to accept scientific facts in policy decision-taking processes. I think it made it again more visible that it is important to base political decisions also on scientific results and research. That the COVID pandemic was a situation that was new. Nobody had such a situation before. To find the right way to deal with this was also a process of fact-finding at the beginning, to know a bit more about that. When I see what also science was able to do in such a short time, when making the research for a vaccination, finding solutions for the way how to deal with the pandemic in the societal questions, should you wear a mask or not? There were also differences between different scientists, if it's useful to wear a mask, which kind of mask, what's necessary or not. And I think what was important is that people saw more and more that political decisions must be based on scientific results, scientific research. But what was also clear is that science cannot replace politics, because you always have to balance between the different interests and the different facts. And I think there is an importance to have scientific results, like I repeated several times, as a basis for political decisions. To be clear on also the consequences of political decision-taking processes and actions, but not to replace politics by science. I think an expert group cannot replace, in the end, the decision the politics have to make, because we have a democracy, and democracy is also a point or a fact that have to be respected, perhaps more than a scientific result. It must reflect a democratic decision too. What politics are doing, what a politician is doing, has also a democratic aspect, and you cannot replace democracy with science and scientific research and result. One of the most important examples that's also in society, meanwhile, is the question of climate change. There are scientists who explain since decades that we have to do something in this field, but there was not really the acceptance also in society for these results. It was uncomfortable, it was let's say, disruptive to structures that were there. And sometimes science is disruptive, and that is difficult to implement that in democratic structures to policy. I think there is an example where the dialogue also between society, politics and science had to be better during the time. I think that is something we can make better in future. Where it worked quite well, to my opinion, is, for example, in health questions. When it comes to the corona crisis, I think the cooperation between science and politics worked quite well. Not always in the question of communication, and there are still problems there, but there the expectance that science have to have a stronger say in what to do and how to react on this crisis was also based in, or was also very strong in the society as such, so that also political decision-taking processes based on scientific results was easier than in some questions in the past. Just call them, I could say. Just call the politicians and talk about the work you are doing. Talk about what you do. In very many cases, it's always very interesting to see what is possible, even if it's not. When I visit, for example, Jülich, it's a research center in my constituency, or when I have a visit on the Aachen University or the University of Applied Sciences in my region. It is always interesting also in cases that have not directly to do with education, with media or other things, to see what is done on scientific level, also to get an overview on the development, technological development, but also when it comes to social sciences, societal developments that are there. It's always interesting to listen to researchers and their work, what they are doing, because it gives an oversight on what's possible and what's perhaps not possible. I would wish that scientists would be as popular as sportsmen, for example, or artists and others. If you ask who is the winner of the last Eurovision Song Contests, many people know. If you ask who got the Nobel Prize, many people have question marks in their eyes. And so for me it would be important to come back to times where scientists were seen also more as public persons and recognized in what they do more than than it is at the moment, because I think that would also help to get more acceptance for scientific results and scientific work in general, and would also raise the interest in perhaps becoming a scientist.